People in America search for someone to blame when the economy falters. It is common to pick out the White House for criticism. But how much of the president is worthy of commendation or censure? The nation's financial future was molded by the opposing policies that Biden and Trump used in their economic war. The proponent of inclusive growth, Biden directed attention to infrastructure and social programs. Trump, on the other hand, touted tax cuts and deregulatory measures as his tools for boosting the economy. This ideological conflict served as the furnace in which wages, employment, and the general economic environment were created. Discussions about market dynamics, government involvement, and the quest for a stable financial future are all reverberating from the aftermath. The political struggles of Biden and Trump over the economy are felt in the corridors of affluence and policy as the public struggles with the fallout. Welcome to our channel. We'll tell you about the economic battle between Biden and Trump in today's video. The 7 distinct components of the economic trend in the initial years of the Trump and Biden administrations are examined in the following. Now let's get started. Number 7. Economic expansion. During his 2016 presidential campaign, Trump made a promise to bring the U.S. economy back to 4% yearly growth. However, he only managed to meet that goal in 2 quarters. The third quarter of 2020 and the fourth quarter of 2017, when the American economy was just beginning to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and reopen. Between the first quarters of 2017 and 2019, there was an average rise of 2.5% each quarter in real GDP, adjusted for inflation. That is a good level for a large and diverse economy that typically grows by 2% to 3% annually, but it is much lower than what Trump had promised and comparable to growth rates after Obama's second term. In his first year in office, Biden oversaw rapid economic growth as federal stimulus funds poured in to offset the economic impact of the pandemic. Growth reached a 7% annual pace in 2 of his first 4 quarters. But during his second year in power, inflation bit and growth slowed down in the first half of 2022. Nevertheless, on average, Biden has managed growth at a quicker pace than Trump. The most recent period for which data are available, from the first quarter of 2021 to the first quarter of 2023, showed that economic growth under the Biden administration averaged 3.1% each quarter. Number 6. Performance of the stock market. Trump placed a high priority on the stock market, overseeing a 21.2% increase in the S&P 500 index from his first day of office until the end of May 2019, or nearly 2.5 years later. His 2017 tax cuts contributed to the favorable climate that was fostered by low unemployment rates and increased company investment as well as consumer spending. During the same period last year, the S&P 500 gained 8.5% under Biden. Say it's the story of 2 markets. Although the benchmark S&P 500 fell 20% and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite about 33% last year as the Federal Reserve tightened monetary policy to control skyrocketing inflation, stocks reached an all-time high at the beginning of 2022. The assumption that the Federal Reserve will soon stop raising interest rates and may perhaps decide to decrease them later in the year contributed to the S&P 500's 9.3% rise this year through May 31st. Number 5. The inflation rate. The United States saw a period of relatively low inflation under the Trump administration, carrying over from the historically low levels seen during Obama's 2 terms in office. From the second quarter of 2009 to the fourth quarter of 2016, inflation averaged 1.4%. From the first 2 years of the Trump administration to the first quarter of 2019, inflation averaged 2.2%. However, the trend of price increase was altered by the government's response to the COVID-19 epidemic, which struck the United States hard in March 2020, and the start of the war in Ukraine in February 2022. As supply chains were disrupted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the Trump and Biden administrations flooded the financial system with cash to offset COVID-related losses, inflation shot up to a 4-decade high and emerged as the primary economic issue of the Biden era. To slow economic growth, the Fed started hiking interest rates in March 2022 after first viewing inflation as temporary. However, inflation has proven more difficult to manage than expected more than a year later. The Consumer Price Index reading of 4.9% in April of this year signified the 9th consecutive month in which the annual pace of inflation has decreased, following a peak of 9% in June 2022. However, monthly gains continue, and the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's favored inflation measure, remains far higher than the central bank's 2% target. This inflation plagues the Biden administration even now, especially in the form of expensive food. Persistently high prices have undermined consumer confidence and reduced Americans' purchasing power, even in the face of a historically robust job market and considerable salary increases. Number 4. The employment situation. During his reign, with the labor above producing 180,000 jobs monthly on average, that was a healthy level for an economy that had already recovered from the recession brought on by the 2008-2009 financial crisis almost 10 years earlier. Furthermore, it was far higher than the 100,000 jobs a month that experts predict are required to keep up with population growth. Since taking office, Biden has witnessed a rise in the employment market, with an average of 470,000 new jobs being created each month. True, he took over a post-COVID rebound in the labor market with ample room to expand, but even as concerns about a recession have grown, job growth has continuously outperformed forecasts. The greatest 2 years of job growth in American history occurred during Biden's first 2 years in office. Since the COVID-19 recession, the size of the labor market as a whole has more than recovered. Number 3. Trends in unemployment. Trump spoke often about the strength of employment growth throughout his administration. For good reason, in 2019, the unemployment rate dropped to 3.5%, the lowest level since May 1969, marking a 50-year low. However, Princeton economics professor Alan Blinder contended that the COVID-19 pandemic's impacts eclipsed the subsequent decline in unemployment and that the boost wasn't a direct outcome of the administration's initiatives. In contrast, Biden took over an unemployment rate of 6.3% in January 2021 and saw it gradually decline to 3.4% in April 2023. However, there hasn't been much of a political reward. As Federal Reserve officials work to contain inflation, the current rate may serve as a benchmark for the administration. John Williams, the president of the New York Fed, believes that to bring inflation down from the CPI's 4.9% reading in April and back to the 2% target rate, the unemployment rate will need to increase to 4.5%. Number 2. Home market. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, home prices in the United States have been rising for almost 30 years. By the end of 2022, the median sale price had more than tripled from $126,000 in 1992 to $479,500. The Biden administration's first 2 years saw some of the steepest increases in median home sale prices in the previous 30 years, as the need for more space combined with a general housing shortage after the COVID pandemic started, despite the Trump administration's boasts about rising property values. While rising property values are wonderful for homeowners, they present difficulties for prospective buyers. According to research, American consumers' financial stability is enhanced by home ownership. This can be threatened by rising property prices. Nevertheless, the market has relaxed. In March, the annual increase in home prices fell to 0.7%, the lowest level in over a decade, as reported by the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller National Composite Index. According to housing specialists, the current slump in the housing market is likely to last through 2023 and possibly even into 2024. Affordability should be enhanced by declining prices, especially after the Fed stops raising interest rates and mortgage rates start to decline. Number 1. Public debt. The federal debt ballooned under both presidents, primarily as a result of Trump's tax cuts and Biden's COVID-19 aid initiatives. Towards the end of the president's term, the Trump administration also implemented significant COVID-19 spending, which increased the national debt, but these expenditures were mostly approved by both parties. Long-term trends and the expansion of programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which are getting more expensive as the American population ages, are largely to blame for the recent increase in the size of the federal deficit. In a 2021 study, Charles Blahus, a senior research strategist at George Mason University's Mercatus Center, calculated that the policies put in place when those programs were implemented in the late 1960s and early 1970s are responsible for around 60% of the overall long-term fiscal imbalance. According to Blahus's estimation, Biden was accountable for 18.5% of the federal deficit in 2021 and Trump for 19.1%. Trump and Biden's ideas became the arena for conflicting ideologies as they negotiated the economic terrain. While Trump promoted tax cuts and deregulation to boost business, Biden focused on infrastructure investment and social programs to achieve inclusive growth. Ideologies collided in the economic sphere, and the public was left to judge how different approaches affected employment, earnings, and general well-being. The result of this continuing conflict affects discussions about market dynamics, government intervention, and the creation of a stable financial environment, which in turn defines the future of the country's economy. If you enjoy watching this video and would want to see more about the economic conflicts between Biden and Trump, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to activate your notification bell to get alerts anytime we post a new video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.